Hello, everyone. Welcome to Make It Monday. I'm Jim with Amy Sews, and today I thought I'd touch on a topic that I had a lady, actually a couple, past week asked me about because they had questions on how to get a really good felt flat seam. And, that's whenever it's kind of like a French seam, but everything is all nicely tucked away and top stitched. So I thought I'd share a couple things with you on how to do that. And with that, I'm going to take you to the overhead camera and show you just how simple it can be. So basically what we're going to start with is your traditional seam. In here, I'm working with denim in the studio right now, so that was an easy fix to grab the denim. And I just sewed it with a traditional 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, nothing fancy about that. Then with this method, like I said, there's a couple different ways of how to do it. Everybody probably has their own preferred method to do it. This is just a way that I find kind of easy and simple to do. So again, it starts with this basic 5/8 inch seam allowance and everything is sewn up. And to help get that really good seam allowance, I quite often use an edge guide foot, or everybody calls them a different name, a clear guide foot, whatever your brand calls for. And this one has a nice little uh, guide on the side of it. And that's what I use to press the fabric against to help me get a good stitch width. And of course, I'll use my needle position to help line it up so I get a good, consistent, straight seam width. So here I have the 5/8 inch done. And then the next step is pretty easy. You just want to go and trim off the seam allowance on one side. So as you can see here, I actually cut away about 1/4 of an inch of that width so that I have a narrow width on one side and a wider width on the other. Once I have that done, I'll then, the side with the wider width, I'll press that over about 1/4 of an inch. So here we have the one seam allowance that was trimmed, and you have the other one over here that wasn't. So it was fold over about 1/4 of an inch and press it, and set it with your steam iron, maybe even a wood block just to help press it over. Once you have that done, you're going to take this and fold it over and then press it a second time. So it looks like this. So we had one side trimmed, one side seam allowance pressed under 1/4 of an inch, and then everything pressed to one side. And as you can see here, I'll put a little block underneath it. That's all pressed to one side. Now that I have that properly pressed, what I quite often do is I'll go to, I will take it over because some people may top stitch here, which this way you're sure to catch the edge of that fold. I like to top stitch from the outside or right side. And that way I'm assured of getting a stitch that's parallel to that seam line. And this way what I could do is I can use that edge guide foot again, and I'll make sure that that seam allowance is under the left side of my needle or my foot here. And the rudder is going to go right within the well of the seam. And all I have to do is position my needle over to get that perfect stitch width. And you could see here on this sample, I have that done already. So basically I'm sewing from the measurement of the seam or the well of the seam over about a scant 3/8 of an inch, and just top stitch it again from the right side because I thought this way I can see it better. And again, I have it perfectly parallel with the well of the seam. And how to do that? I have my foot with my guide attached, and I have that rudder riding right within the well of the seam. And that's where I'm looking. I'm not looking at the needle or the side of the foot. I'm looking at that little rudder. If I maintain that rudder to be within the well of the seam, I know that the needle will actually pierce the fabric exactly and precisely where I want it to go with no effort, pretty much at all on my part. And then if you do like the look of the double stitching, then I would go ahead and add a second row right along the very edge of that seam allowance, or actually that seam. And then it actually goes into the seam allowance, reinforcing that seam itself, but it also adds a more decorative look because quite often a lot of jeans are done in this fashion. One thing too, you may want to lengthen your stitch length when you do this top stitching. One way that's a good giveaway of something that's homemade as opposed to something you bought is the stitch length. Quite often when we do our top stitching, we use the same stitch length that we use to construct the garment, when quite often when you look at ready-made garments or bespoke garments, high-end garments, their stitch length is longer because they want that thread to pop to make it a design feature. And to do that, you need to go and lengthen it. So this was actually length of 3.0 as opposed to my normal 2.5, and that was for both of them. And I will share a little secret about these two, because just to make that thread pop out more, because quite often when you're making something like this, a pair of jeans, that when they would do the top stitching, they would do it with a heavier weight thread. This is regular sewing machine weight thread. However, I'll show it here. I have 2 strands of thread going through the eye of the needle. So when I did the top stitching on the right side, the needle had 2 threads in it, but my bobbin only had a single thread. And you can see here, you can barely see the stitching line. And as I show you on this sample here, the stitching on the right, that was done with 2 threads through the eye of the needle. And the one on the left was that same thread, only one of it. So this was 1 strand of my regular sewing machine thread through the eye of one needle. So I'm only sewing it once. And this heavier look, I did it with that same stitch length, except I did 2 strands of thread through the eye of one needle to give it that higher density look, much more like ready-made. And you can see like side by side there. The difference is by adding that extra layer of thread. And again, it didn't take any extra effort on my part, because all I had to do was thread the needle once, but with 2 strands as opposed to threading it with one. One thing too, you do want to go and make sure that you don't use your needle threader when you're putting 2 strands in, because actually your needle threader was designed to work with 1 strand at a time, not 2. So we're actually asking the machine to do something it wasn't designed to do. So if you're having a lot of issues with your needle threader, quite often it's the person behind the button pushing the button for the needle threader to work. So you're actually asking to do something it wasn't designed to do. So in this case, I would go ahead and use my old-fashioned method of eyeing it and putting it through, as opposed to trying to use the needle threader and likewise damaging it too. So hopefully you get a little inspiration on how to make a frill flat seam really simple, quite often just by adding the right little foot. It makes it a lot simpler. So with that being said, thanks for watching. Be sure you go to amysews.com and sign up to get the notifications when we go live, as well as to go to our website, Amy Bachman Sewing Quilt, and sign up for the different kind of classes we have to offer, because we do monthly subscription boxes for serging as well as scan and cut. They alternate, and you never know when the box is going to open up, and you can sign up. So be sure, if it's not currently available for you, get on that mailing list, and we can get you signed up for that. And if you kind of like what I had to offer here, I also am on the staff of the Original Sewing Quilt Expo, that you could go to the sewingexpo.com website to check out my current schedule there, as we are quite often on the road teaching throughout the United States. And that being said, hopefully maybe I'll see you in class someday soon. And if not, here at the store. So if you're in the area, we're located in lovely Harmony, Pennsylvania. That's just east of Pittsburgh, right off the turnpike. So we're pretty easy to find. So again, thanks for watching. We really appreciate all the feedback and support, and be sure to share the love of your knowledge of sewing and what we have to offer with your friends too. Again, thanks again. And remember, the more you know, the more you'll sew. Take care.